What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening.
In the last episode, we talked about inflammation and how the body only heals in the absence of inflammation, but the brain can also heal through neuroplasticity. In this episode, I'm going to share a case study of one of my clients, and I hope that you find that he becomes your favorite story as much as he is one of my favorite stories. Don't forget, I will be reading during this episode. I met Kerwin Aline and his mother at a Guthie Jackson NMO Patient Day event in 2013. When they approached me in the lobby after my presentation, my impression was of a smart, muscular young man who was bitter that life had dealt him this hand of a body that was becoming increasingly dysfunctional. 2 years earlier, he had been perfectly fine, but by this meeting he had been in a wheelchair for almost a year and had already given up hope for ever getting out of it. He confesses that he didn't believe he was going to live very long, so why even try to get better? He was in a dark place, understandably so. Kerwin's symptoms began when he was 17 years old. It started with numbness and coldness in his hand that moved up into his arm. The sensation persisted long enough that he took to wearing a sleeve in an attempt to keep warm. Then the numbness moved to the other arm. This lasted for 6 to 8 months. He lost motor functions in his hands and couldn't pick up a pen for 6 months. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Kerwin went into remission, and for about 6 years he lived and functioned without thinking much about his diagnosis. He led an active young adult life, building a reputation as a manager of musical artists in Atlanta, Georgia. He was working a day job and then spending nights out at music clubs promoting his clients. He was burning the candle at both ends while his entire digestive tract was a mess, from his guts to his bowels and his bladder. The almost constant pain was manageable only with regular doses of pain management pills. He wasn't eating healthy foods, sleeping enough, or taking care of himself. Then he experienced 6 or 7 relapses in the span of a year, at the end of which, despite losing muscle and pounds from constantly feeling unwell, his legs would no longer bear his weight. By the time he was 24 years old, he was living in a wheelchair and feeling like his life sucked. His diagnosis had progressed to neuromyelinating optitis, or NMO, which ruled out the hope of another remission of his symptoms. NMO has been described to me as being like MS on steroids. He felt trapped in a dysfunctional body until that day at the event, when he and his mother felt a glimmer of hope for the first time. Choosing to work with me in my inflammation investigator program was an active choice to change and for him to learn how to put forth the effort if he wanted to walk again. It was a lot of money, but it was an active choice, he insists. And that was a turning point for him. He was making a choice to try to reclaim his life, and he took it seriously. The biggest part of the whole journey for me has been learning to understand my body and its triggers, Kerwin volunteers when we reconnect a decade later. That and changing my mindset really helped. All of this took time to figure out. He started off on an herbal parasite cleanse, and just by taking that one step, he reported on March 3rd, 2014, that he was feeling a little stronger afterward and was able to stand on his own for a brief time. And this was before even beginning the customized anti-inflammatory diet called LEAP. As he progressed through the LEAP dietary therapy program, he was surprised to find how obvious it became that his food choices were affecting his body. He describes it as simply paying attention to what he eats. It's similar to if I want to be ripped and have a six-pack, he remarks. I'm probably not going to eat that cake if that's my goal. But instead, it's more like, if I choose to eat that particular food item, I know I'm going to be on the toilet for 3 days, or constipated, or my legs will be stiff or burning, something like that, just from eating the wrong food. It wasn't that he had been intentionally unhealthy before. It was more that he had been following generalized dietary advice, as he had been unaware of what actually bothered his body. My mom and I used to eat tofu every day in place of scrambled eggs, he remembers ruefully, in the belief that tofu was a healthier choice than eggs for him. When his mediator release test, MRT results, came back and showed him to be highly reactive to soy, he realized that he had been unintentionally triggering inflammation in his body every day. Tofu was taking me out, he exclaims ruefully. Choosing to work with you and changing my diet catapulted me back into walking, Kerwin remembers. Though it wasn't always easy, as he describes in this email on April 23rd, 2014. I've run into a little issue on my way to school today. I started to feel lightheaded and really faint. Within minutes, I started to sweat heavily and started to have spasms and burning in my legs. This went on for about 45 minutes until eventually I stopped driving and called 911. They had the fire department and the EMT come look at me, and they told me that I had low blood sugar and low blood pressure and gave me glucose and tried to put an IV in me. They then made me eat something and drink water until I felt better. And since I refused to go to the hospital, they let me go once I was coherent again. I was wondering if you thought this had anything to do with the episodes that you were talking about. I remember you mentioning that I will have episodes while my body is adjusting to the removal of things that affect me. Or do you think my eating habits and water intake are just bad, and which is what the EMT said? This incident was indeed a significant exacerbation or flare-up of the inflammation in his body. He is correct that intense events like this one can occur as we clear out our exposure to triggers. Think of it this way. Someone who suffers from an autoimmune condition is probably walking around with 70 to 90% inflammation on any given day. Starting at 85% inflamed and then triggering an additional 5 to 10% of inflammation might not feel that much different. You might not even recognize such a small change because you were already feeling pretty crappy to begin with. Small changes can make it difficult or almost impossible to recognize the correlation between the exposure and the symptom. However, by consistently working to identify and reduce your exposures to your personal inflammatory triggers, you can bring that baseline inflammation level down to 10 to 20%, which feels much, much better. But then, when we do encounter an inflammatory trigger, the jump from 20% to 90% inflammation is significant and noticeable. It might not be as scary as what happened to Kerwin, but the symptom will be new and unmistakable and maybe even severe. I responded to Kerwin as such. "How scary! I'm glad you were okay. It sounds like you had a serious reaction to something new that you ate or were exposed to. Think carefully. What was new or different that you ate, took, a medication, or put on your body, lotion, etc., within the 3 days prior to this? My son has had reactions like you describe. He just had a similar one 2 weeks ago from inulin, an additive often used in gluten-free packaged foods. It doesn't take much to trigger this. I keep homeopathic antihistamine around to help him recover more quickly. You can order some through me, or you can also use dye-free Benadryl in a pinch. You'll still suffer, but you can alleviate the worst of it. You should expect to feel the after effects, kind of like a hangover, for 1 to 3 days following this experience. Be sure you are back to eating your original safe foods until it passes. I don't think this has to do with eating habits or water intake. That is a generic guess, and you are not in the general population." After a few more emails back and forth with me, Kerwin had narrowed down the trigger suspects to parsley and onions as the new foods he had eaten in the days leading up to that scary episode. Besides the incident in his car, which he agreed felt very much like an allergic reaction, Kerwin reported his body was improving noticeably. While he still had some gut issues, he no longer considered himself to be a constipated person. Even more tellingly, after 14 months of complete dependence on a wheelchair, he had started taking steps on his own. In just 2 months of working together, he had gone from struggling to stand to taking 20 steps on his own. He became convinced that avoiding his triggers was the solution and began to want to learn how to cook and take control of his food. 1 month later, on May 20th, 2014, Kerwin triggered another very different type of exacerbation. Following is our email conversation as we work to identify the trigger of this new symptom. 3:22 p.m. Hey, Elizabeth. Question. I woke up this morning with my whole middle finger on my right hand sore, like I had jammed it playing basketball the night before. But it was the whole finger. Even the joints down the middle of my hand are sore. I'm wondering if this is a possible reaction. 4:34 p.m. Hi, Kerwin. No one ever told me that reactions could manifest in stiffness and pain like you have, but I used to suffer from severe and constant carpal tunnel pain in my wrists. After my diagnosis of MS, my father, a really smart neurologist, remarked that the MS diagnosis now explained the wrist soreness and pain. Since I changed my diet, that pain has gone away and not come back. So the long and short of it is that, yes, this could possibly be a reaction if it is not an injury. Can you track it to anything new that you ate? 7:04 p.m. I think it was this chicken I've been eating for the past couple days. My dad told me he cooked it with onions. I figured I would still try it to see if I get any reaction from it. 8:43 p.m. Aha! Good detective work, my friend. Your MRT results show you to be highly reactive to onions, so your instincts were right on. Remember that food sensitivity reactions can be dose dependent. You may eventually find that eating a chicken cooked with onions is okay once, but eating it several days in a row overloads your system. Right now, your body is still really sensitive and reactionary. So even just having cooked the safe food with the unsafe food gave you too many reactive molecules for your body to deal with. Now that you are at a safe place and no longer constantly reacting all the time and chronically inflamed like you were 4 months ago, you might experience more weird reactions like this one. Retreat back to your original safe diet until your finger pain resolves and you are back to where you were before this started. And stay away from onions. You need at least 6 months without any exposure to onions now. Sorry, Dad. Eventually, as your body heals more and more and becomes stronger and stronger, all of your tolerance levels will rise, and you may be able to tolerate chicken cooked with onions every so often. You can try it again at Christmas time. Be aware of other strange reactions and be suspicious of anything new and negative going on with your body. You were right to suspect this was a hypersensitivity reaction. Unless you actually injured the finger, this was most certainly new inflammation. Fast forward 10 years to 2024, and Kerwin is now a 37-year-old software engineer living and working around the globe in a digital nomad lifestyle. He is not in a wheelchair and does not regularly use any other assistive devices, such as a cane or a walker. The difference between a regular able-bodied person and me, says Kerwin, is that I constantly need to be in tune with my body, he reports from his current abode in Guadalajara, Mexico. He notes he often finds it easier to eat safely in Latin America, where food is more often cooked from scratch, than in the U.S., where he has to inspect his meals very carefully in order to spot soy, food dyes, or other hidden additives that could wreak havoc on his body. Reflecting back on his health struggles and the journey he has taken to get to where he is today, as a strong, independent man, a world traveler with a job that gives him freedom and legs that allow him to roam, he announces, "I've come to a good life." I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I always do. I can't wait to talk to you in the next episode.
And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.